3 bone-chilling Burger King nightmares that will haunt you forever. In the quiet darkness of a suburban night, 3 unsettling stories would unfold around the fluorescent glow of a Burger King. Picture it, the distant sound of crickets chirping blended with the sizzling of fries, an ordinary setting turning extraordinarily eerie. With each burger tossed into the fryer, shadows lengthened, and secrets swirled deeper than the greasy depths of the fryer. The first tale would strike at a crisp midnight when a customer, frantic and overwhelmed by an unshakable sense of dread, found herself staring into the unfathomable. She claimed she saw the face of a long-lost love in her onion rings, dark and twisted, reaching out through the grease-laden veil. Was it simply her imagination, or had the spirits of the departed returned through the very food she consumed? As locals whispered about the cursed onion ring sighting, curiosity swelled. Who knew what darkness lay beneath that shiny, plastic exterior? Fast forward a week, and the second story erupted. An employee discovered a faded receipt, mysteriously stuck under the fryer, chronicling a bizarre transaction from 20 years ago. The total? A paltry 33 cents. But it wasn't the amount that caught their attention, it was the name scribbled at the bottom, one matching a local legend of a boy who vanished from town that very year, never to be seen again. As the whispers turned to shouts of hysteria, customers began to wonder if the king's crown had always been made of something sinister. And then there was the final shocking tale, peaking like raw tension in a horror film-esque climax. On a foggy Tuesday night, a group of teenagers dared each other to take selfies in front of the restaurant. As they posed, laughter echoed through the drive-thru. But when they checked their photos, something gripping seized their hearts, a ghostly figure in the back seat of their ride, eyes hollow, mouth open in a silent scream. Panic ensued. Were they being watched? Was the king keeping more than just burgers he served? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As the pieces of these bone-chilling encounters fell into place, a question lingered in the air: what other terror lay hidden behind the iconic Burger King facade? What waited in the shadows of those fluorescent lights, ready to devour anyone brave enough to approach? Darkness was creeping, and soon, the night would reveal its secrets. The night had grown thick with tension as customers trickled in, their faces lit by the harsh flicker of fluorescent lights. The essence of fear hung in the air, sticky and palpable, like the grease splattered on the floors. Each clattering tray or giggling conversation felt like a defiant shout into a gathering storm. Unbeknownst to them, they would soon find themselves stepping deeper into the very nightmares that had begun haunting their town. At a corner table, a lanky teenager named Jake fidgeted with his fries. Buzzing with adrenaline, he couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that he was being watched. As he glanced towards the drive-thru, an icy shiver raced down his spine. There, hidden in the shadows, a figure loomed tall and featureless, hemmed in darkness. He looked closer, squinting, but the apparition melted away like smoke when illuminated by a passing car's headlights. "Hey, dude. You okay?" His friend Claire snapped him back to reality, slapping him lightly on the arm. "Yeah, just thinking about those stories." Jake wasn't alone in his paranoia. Overhead, the little TV played reruns, the sound mixing with murmurs of disbelief from nearby customers. The onion ring face, the haunting selfies, each tale was punctuated by nervous laughter that barely scratched the surface of genuine fear. It was as if the restaurant and its cursed histories had become a social experiment. Who among them was brave enough to face what loomed in the dark? Then, the door swung open with a creak. An elderly man shuffled in, his face pale, almost ghostly. He approached the counter, voice cracking like brittle bones, asking for a burger. The worker, visibly shaken at the sight of him, hesitantly obliged. Behind the man, the bell above the entry chimed again, but not a single customer noticed. Instead, everyone watched as he clutched the grease-stained paper bag like a lifeline. Suddenly, he paused and turned toward the onlookers, his eyes wild with terror. "There's something wrong in this place," he shouted, his voice raising an alarm. "I saw him. I saw him back there." He pointed toward the kitchen, where the faint silhouette of a person could be seen moving in the shadows. Gasps erupted across the restaurant. Fear turned to chaos as chairs scraped back and a collective rush toward the exit began. "Calm down," someone yelled, but it was too late. The unsettling mystery had rooted itself deep, and panic zapped through the crowd like an electric current. Claire tugged at Jake's arm, and they stumbled backward, nearly tripping over fallen trays. "Is this a joke?" she breathed, glancing toward the moving shadows. "What did he see?" Jake shook his head, heart pounding. "What if it's real?" Just then, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into eerie half-light. The smell of charred meat filled the air, and in that moment, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, followed by an unnatural silence. Whispers flickered among the crowd, questions that gnawed deeper than any fear could. "Something's not right." And in that moment of dread, the drive-through speaker crackled to life, static bursting like an unseen beast awakening. The voice that followed was chillingly familiar but jarring, echoing with a ghoulish snarl, "Who's hungry for a thrill?" As Jake and Claire stood frozen, they spotted a flicker of movement behind the kitchen door, a figure emerging into the dim light. What horrors awaited them next? Little did they know, the last chapter of their stories was about to unfold, wrapped in shadows and secrets that demanded to be revealed. The lights jolted back to life and flickered once more, slicing through the oppressive darkness like an unexpected knife. Jake squinted, straining to see the figure stepping from the kitchen as more customers screamed, scrambling to the exits in a wave of panic. A few dropped their trays and others followed, spilling sodas in their frantic rush to escape the unknown terror. The figure emerged, its form becoming clearer under the buzzing fluorescence. It was the bloated, disheveled visage of a man, face marred with deep lines reminiscent of old scars, and eyes that glimmered with an unsettling hunger. His mouth curled into a grotesque smile, revealing teeth stained dark, like remnants of forgotten meals. "Who's hungry for a thrill?" he repeated, his voice dripping with malice, sending fresh waves of dread surging through the restaurant. "No! Get away!" Claire cried, yanking at Jake's arm, pulling him away from the dreadful spectacle, but Jake was rooted in place, his heart drumming a chaotic rhythm in his chest. "Wait, look!" he yelled, pointing to the old man who had originally issued the warning. The elder now stood frozen, almost entranced, shaking in his ragged clothes as his wild eyes bounced between the figure and the frenzied crowd. "Get out! Get out now!" The old man shouted, but his voice was drowned by screams and shouts. He lunged toward the exit, but it was blocked as people surged against it, desperate to get outside. The man in the kitchen took a slow, deliberate step forward, his movements deliberate yet eerily graceful, like a dancer trapped in a horror show. "Have you ever walked into the dark?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that sent chills spiraling through Jake. "Have you dared to uncover the secrets that linger beneath the surface?" More crashed chairs filled the air. Jake finally shook off his paralysis, grabbing Claire's hand tightly. "We need to go," he yelled, pulling her toward an alternative route, the restroom in the back corner. The elderly man was clinging to a table for support, his frame trembling. "This way!" he called to them, desperation etched across his ghastly features. As Jake and Claire rushed past, they heard the haunting laughter echoing from the man, rising above the chaos like a twisted melody. Just as Jake thought they could escape down the corridor where the restroom sign hung crookedly on the wall, another crash behind them made them freeze in their tracks. "Jake, please!" Claire begged, her eyes wide with terror. Swallowing hard, he turned to face the kitchen door one more time. The man's grotesque smile had widened, revealing his dark, brackish teeth like a predator savoring its potential prey. Come inside. There's nothing to fear, if you dare. The swarm of small, terrified voices around them intensified. They couldn't reach the exit, they couldn't go back. The laughter rang again, shattering the air with its manic edge. Let us go. Jake urged, dragging Claire toward the restroom, but the door slammed shut in front of them, locking them away from the innocent hope of escape. They pressed their backs against the wall, breathing hard, their hearts racing like wild horses. Jake could feel the darkness pressing in around the edges of his vision while Claire trembled beside him. Did you see that? She gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. Did you see his face? Yes, Jake replied, trembling. What did we stumble into? There's something wrong here. Something that shouldn't exist. Suddenly, the flickering lights went out again, and a wave of silence rolled over the restaurant, deeper than before. They exchanged horrified glances, realizing in unison that they were no longer alone. The presence that haunted the shadows had found them. Then, through the oppressive blackness, a single voice cut through, whispering with a sibilant hiss, "Let us play." The dread coiled tighter around them, ready to snatch them away as the shadows danced ominously. What awaited behind the darkness? Would they uncover the truth or become part of the horror that echoed in the night? The darkness pressed against Jake and Claire like a heavy blanket, suffocating and oppressive. Claire's trembling hand slipped from Jake's grasp. He fumbled for her in the inky blackness, panic rising like bile in his throat. Claire. He whispered, voice trembling, fear lacing every syllable. I'm here. She gasped, her voice barely cutting through the void. Her presence felt close, but the weight of the shadows twisted their surroundings into an eerie maze. They were trapped in a nightmare, each second dragging like molten lead. Stay close, Jake urged, his pulse nearly drowning out the chilling silence. Together they shuffled backwards, the smooth tile of the floor beneath their feet now feeling ominously slick. Then came the laughter again. The manic, creaking cackle echoed through the tight space, bouncing off unseen walls, wrapping around like a twisted vine. It beckoned to them, teasing. Are you ready to join the feast? Claire squeezed Jake's arm, nails digging into his skin, her eyes wide and shimmering with fear. What's happening? She breathed, her voice cracking. Just stay together. We'll find a way out, he replied, steeling himself against the darkness. But the shadows were alive. They whispered rancid secrets, taunted with the taste of forbidden knowledge. Suddenly, a blinding light flickered back on. But instead of the comforting glow of safety, it illuminated something much worse. Rows of twisted faces peering at them from the dining area, their locked jaws slack, mouths agape like grotesque puppets. Their eyes glimmered with a hollow hunger, staring intently as if they'd been waiting for ages. Who are they? Claire stammered, her throat dry. They look like the customers, Jake replied, horrified. He could feel the collective gaze press against him, heavy and unyielding. It was as if they were part of some sick game, a twisted tableau of horror frozen in time. The bloated figure from the kitchen reappeared, his grotesque visage now exaggerated by the piercing light. Welcome to the feast. He growled, voice a low rumble that resonated through the entire space. There's room for everyone at the table if you're willing to play. Jake's heart raced as the light brightened, revealing a monitor's display, a chart of names and dates flickering like a sinister scoreboard, each name troublingly familiar. What the hell is this? He barked, struggling to comprehend the horror unfolding before him. Did you think this was just a burger joint? The figure scoffed. You've stumbled into a banquet of souls. Jake felt bile rise in his throat. We need to get out of here. He turned to Claire, searching her face, but the wildness in her eyes made his stomach drop. We can't stay. But as he pulled her toward what looked like the only other exit, a dimly illuminated hallway, the kitchen door swung open with a creak too loud in the stunned silence. Another figure emerged, slick and shimmering with darkness, every step oozing sinister intent. Going somewhere? A soft voice purred, as Jake's mind raced, searching for a plan. They were flanked, no route to escape. Behind him, the patrons began to moan softly, their collective voices rising in a dreadful chorus. "Join us," they whispered, hands reaching toward them like tendrils of night. "Run!" Jake shouted, gripping Claire's hand tighter as they dashed toward the hallway. The darkness surged, threatening to swallow them whole. He didn't care about the danger behind him. They had to escape the suffocating dread, the promise of a twisted feast waiting inside. The hallway stretched before them, dark and foreboding, radiating a malevolent energy. With every step, Jake felt the oppressive atmosphere pushing against him, the walls almost breathing in a sinister rhythm. Was this corridor their escape, or merely a different kind of trap waiting to ensnare them in darkness? As they reached the end, an unsettling sound emanated from behind, laughter that echoed with delight. "The game has just begun," it called, that predatory voice of the figure taunting them, reverberating in the confined space. Jake stole a glance back one last time, heart pounding, knowing that whatever lay behind them would not simply let them leave. "What's waiting for us down the hall?" Claire murmured, as dread pooled in her voice, tightening the knot in his stomach. "I don't know," Jake admitted, breathless, the terror mounting. "But we have to keep moving before it's too late." And as the laughter crescendoed, their fates hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of an unnamable horror, the shadows clawing at their heels. What awaited in the depths of that eerie hallway? Would they discover the horrifying truth, or would they become just another meal to the insatiable shadows? The dim corridor felt like a serpent winding around them, ready to squeeze the life out of its prey. Jake pushed Claire ahead, his heartbeat pounding in his ears like a war drum. Each step was a gamble, every shadow heavy with the dread of their pursuers. The laughter echoed behind them, reverberating down the hallway, a chilling reminder that they weren't alone. "Faster!" Jake urged, fear scorching his throat. Claire's breath came in panicked gasps, her once steady presence now slipping into sheer anxiety as they wove through the fog of terror that had engulfed them. They stumbled into another room, its entrance yawning open like a mouth ready to swallow them whole. The lights flickered, casting long, grotesque shadows on the wall. It looked like a storage area, metal shelves stacked with blackened, rusted cans, bags of grain, and unidentifiable meat scraps. The overwhelming smell was a mix of decay and something sweet, akin to rotting fruit. "Where are we?" Claire whispered, eyes darting as if the darkness itself was creeping up on them. "Does it matter?" Jake snapped, trying to mask the fear rising in his chest. "We just need a place to hide, at least until we can think." They ducked behind a shelf, its cold metal biting into Jake's back. He counted the seconds, his breaths shallow and quick. The faint sounds of the dining room patrons echoed through the wall, their whispers slipping through like dark echoes of a forgotten nightmare begging them to join. "That laughter, it's like they're playing." Claire trembled next to him, her skin pale. "It's twisted. Who are they?" "They were customers," he blurted, fighting the images of their hollow faces from his mind. "Now they're something else. They've been consumed by this place." Suddenly, the door creaked open, light spilling across the room. A figure stepped in, one of the sinister patrons, skin pale and stretched over bones as if once human but now a mockery of life. Its mouth curled into a gaunt smile, eyes glistening with an otherworldly hunger. "Looking for a place to hide?" it crooned, voice dripping with sickly sweetness. "You shouldn't stay too long, things can get uncomfortable." Jake felt his stomach drop, panic rising as the figure scanned the room, searching. "We can't stay here," he mouthed to Claire, who nodded, eyes wide and panicked. As the figure started moving deeper into the room, Jake made a leap for it, dragging Claire behind him. They burst out through the opposite door and into what looked like the kitchen, a chaotic tangle of gleaming metal appliances and food scraps littering the floor. "Where now?" Claire asked, her voice sharp with anxiety. "Maybe we could find something to defend ourselves," Jake said, heart hammering. The kitchen was more alive than the rest of the place, flashing lights, hissing fryers, and the smell of charred meat filled the air. They rushed to a drawer, digging through sharp knives and spatulas, anxiety twisting their stomachs tighter than before. "Take this," Jake whispered, shoving a knife into Claire's shaking hand. Her grip was weak, but determination sparked in her eyes. "Wait, did you hear that?" Claire said, freezing mid-movement. Jake strained to listen. In the distance, a dissonant melody echoed, distorted and twisted, a song clawing at the edges of sanity. Each note felt like it was calling out to them, pulling them deeper into the void. "It's coming from," Jake hesitated, the suffocating fear tightening its grip on him once more. "The back of the kitchen?" Suddenly, the door they had just exited swung open again, the soft voice returning. "Haven't you learned? You can't escape the feast." Jake felt the walls closing in around them, and every instinct screamed to run. "We have to," he gasped. As they sprinted to the back of the kitchen, the laughter melded with the song, enveloping them like an icy shroud. Would they find the answers they desperately sought, or would they fall into the trap of sweet melodies and ravenous souls? Their hearts raced, but the door loomed in front of them, a final barrier between liberation and the monstrous feast waiting. Behind what awaited behind that door? Would it lead them to freedom, or another layer of darkness and horror within the twisted establishment? The door creaked open as Jake and Claire pushed through, entering the dimly lit space that seemed to breathe around them. The air was thick and heavy, filled with the sickly sweet scent of something charred, something alive once, now transformed into grotesque forms they could hardly comprehend. Flickers of light from exposed wires cast a frenetic energy, illuminating ghastly images on the walls, deformed faces, hands reaching outward, desperate for salvation. "What is this place?" Claire whispered, her voice just above a breath. It trembled, as if echoing the fear perched on her chest. "Looks like the storage for whatever they serve here," Jake replied, his heart thudding like a hammer against a nail. He scanned the room, the shelves lined with mismatched containers, some labeled with fading stickers, others unmarked and waiting to reveal their secrets. Just as they stepped further inside, the laughter echoed again, louder this time. It seemed to dance around them, weaving through the air like a sinister specter. Jake gripped Claire's hand tighter, trying to anchor their fading resolve. "What if it's a trap?" Claire's voice was laced with panic. She turned back towards the door, now a portal to unseen horrors. "No turning back," Jake insisted, even as uncertainty gnawed at him. They needed answers. Fast at the far end of the room, a door stood ajar, slightly swaying as if beckoning them closer. It was almost imperceptible at first, but the dim light it emitted drew them like moths to a flame. What lay beyond? "Should we check it out?" Claire hesitated, her voice barely breaking the stale air. "Absolutely," Jake said firmly, forcing a bravado he didn't feel. They approached the door, the laughter fading into a low hum, replaced by a pulse of fear that thrummed in their veins. As they pushed the door open, a chilling sight greeted them. It was a makeshift dining area, grim and macabre. A long table was set with plates filled with disturbing food, amber-colored meat pieces, blackened vegetables, and eerie, gelatinous blobs sitting in undulating puddles. In the center of the table stood a grotesque centerpiece, what looked like a human heart, perfectly preserved but oozing a thick, dark syrup. "What the hell?" Jake breathed, taking a step back, his stomach twisting in response. Is this what they serve?" Claire's voice trembled, horrified wonder mixing with the reality before them. Before Jake could respond, the laughter erupted again, this time accompanied by a chorus of heavy footsteps approaching from the kitchen. He felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "Quick! We have to hide," he urged, dragging Claire toward the table. They ducked low, heartbeats crashing against their ribs as the footsteps grew nearer. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a figure stepped inside, a monstrous shape cloaked in shadows, eyes gleaming like shards of glass. It was humanoid but grotesquely distorted, a grotesque blend of human and something unearthly. You found the feast, it cooed, a sinister smile splitting its face. No escape now, or have you come to join us? Jake glanced at Claire, terror mirroring in her wide, pleading eyes. Then, the lights flickered ominously, plunging the room into darkness for a heartbeat that stretched into eternity. Silence swallowed them whole. Jake's breath was fast, each exhale feeling like it could be their last. We have to make a run for it. He whispered urgently, just as he turned to propel them forward, a cold hand clamped down on his shoulder, firm, unyielding. You think you can escape the feast? The breathy voice whispered. Panic rang through Jake as he locked eyes with Claire, their shared fear igniting his desperation. Move! He shouted, tearing away from the grip as the darkness roared back to life. Would they be swallowed by the shadows, or could they wrench free from the sinister grasp of this monstrous banquet? Every second counted as they raced against the encroaching nightmare, but just as they thought they had a chance, the laughter erupted again, more intense, more foreboding than before. What were they truly up against? Was this just the beginning of something far worse lurking beyond the horizon? Jake's heart raced as he yanked Claire from their hiding spot, adrenaline pumping through his veins. The grotesque figure loomed behind them, its shadow stretching grotesquely as if it were a living nightmare. They bolted towards the kitchen, hope driving them forward with every frantic step. What if it catches us? Claire whimpered, glancing back. The thick darkness roiled like a living entity, swallowing their surroundings. The laughter still echoed, a cruel reminder they were not alone. Just keep moving. Jake hissed, pushing through the kitchen doorway, urging her along. The smell of burnt meat mingled with something rotten, making his stomach turn. They ducked into the dimly lit corridor that branched off the main kitchen area, dodging behind a stack of warped crates, barely managing to hold their balance. They can't see us if we keep low, he reassured Claire, but it was a poor consolation. The shadows shifted unnaturally around them, dark figures flitting just beyond their line of sight. Suddenly, another echo of laughter ricocheted off the cramped walls, like a knife tearing through the air. Jake's chest tightened with dread as they huddled together, fighting to catch their breath. What do they want from us? Claire murmured, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I don't know, but we have to find a way out, Jake replied, searching the corridor for an escape. As he scanned the area, he noticed a faint light seeping from a door at the end, flickering like a heartbeat. He nodded toward it. There. That might be our way out. With renewed determination, they crept along the corridor, each step heavy with uncertainty. The sounds of their pursuer faded as they approached the door. Jake's hand trembled as he reached for the handle, half expecting it to be another trap, another cruel twist of fate. That he turned the handle slowly, the hinges squeaking in protest. Claire's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, as the door creaked open, a sliver of hope pierced through the suffocating darkness. What lay beyond was surreal. A brightly lit room filled with bizarre decorations. The walls were garishly painted, the colors too cheerful for the horror they had just experienced. But that wasn't the only thing that struck him. A massive neon sign hanging above the center of the room read, "Welcome to the feast." Jake felt an urge to recoil. What is this? He whispered, stepping inside. The laughter exploded again, echoing all around them, bouncing off the walls like a sinister symphony. The source seemed to be coming from an elaborate setup of oversized chairs and ludicrously oversized plates scattered around a massive table that stretched beyond sight. And at that moment, figures emerged from the shadows, flitting out like puppets on strings. They were disfigured, their faces twisted into grotesque smiles that seemed permanently affixed. Jake's pulse raced as he recognized the unmistakable look of hunger in their eyes. What do we do? Claire panicked, her grip tightening around Jake's wrist. Their options were dwindling as the creatures closed in, the sinister joy radiating from them palpable in the air. Run! Find a way out! Jake shouted, but the words felt hollow, lost in the chaos as the eerie laughter grew closer, more frenzied. In that instant, they dashed toward a side door on the opposite end, desperation fueling their escape. Behind them, the laughter spiraled into a chaotic frenzy, drowning them in a wave of terror. With barely a second to gather their wits, they flung themselves through the side door, plunging into another dark corridor. They stumbled forward, panting, racing toward freedom. But the laughter transformed into something deeper, a low growl rumbling through the walls, echoing in the cavern of despair that surrounded them. It reverberated off their very bones, a reminder that they were still being hunted. "We can't keep running forever," Claire said between gasps, panic twisting her voice. Jake could see the flicker of fear in her eyes, and it gnawed at him. "Then we need to fight," he declared, determination igniting within him. There had to be a way to confront this horror. Just as they reached another door, Jake turned to Claire, ready to take a stand. But as he pushed open the door, a horrifying sight awaited them. "Welcome to your final course," boomed a voice from inside, chilling them to their core. What awaited them next would challenge everything they believed. Could they turn the tables on their captors, or were they doomed to join the feast? As the shadows encroached with a monstrous roar, Jake and Claire stood on the verge of either salvation or a fate worse than they could imagine. Would they find the courage to face the darkness? The door swung wide, crashing against the wall and revealing a room brimming with twisted delights. Desks piled high with grotesque, glimmering trinkets weighed down by dust, while posters adorned with laughing faces stared at them, frozen in a peculiar celebration of horror. Jake's breath hitched in his throat. The voice echoed again, like thunder in a cramped room. "Welcome to your final course." The source of the voice slinked out of the shadows, a figure much larger than Jake or Claire. It was clad in what looked like a patchwork of skin, mismatched and oozing a ghastly sheen. The creature's smile widened, revealing a mouth full of jagged, sharp teeth that seemed made for something other than laughter. "Feast your eyes. This will be a banquet to remember." It crooned, a mixture of hunger and delight dancing in its eyes. Jake could feel Claire tremble beside him. "We can't stay here," he whispered urgently. But the moment their eyes met, the shadows shifted again, coiling around them as if sensing their fear. In an instant, the creatures from the feast room flooded through the door behind them, leaping forward in a disjointed frenzy. Their laughter, once distant, became a cacophony of madness that twisted the space around them into a dizzying maze of chaos. "Run!" Jake shouted, grabbing Claire's hand and pulling her through the mass of garish decorations. They darted toward the clamor, weaving between oversized chairs and unnoticed tables, desperately seeking a way out before the hunger in the room got to them. "No, no, no!" Claire cried out, her voice rising above the din. They veered left, slamming into a wall that felt almost alive. The monstrous laughter began to echo all around them, bouncing off the walls until it became a symphony of hysteria. "Turn!" Jake yelled, spotting a narrow gap between two monstrous decorations. They dove through it just as claws grazed the fabric of Jake's shirt. The moment was a rush of raw adrenaline, making every cell in his body screech for survival. Emerging on the other side, they tumbled into what appeared to be a kitchen. Steel pots hung above them, their reflections shimmering in the dim light. But the moment they thought they might catch their breath, a shrill voice pierced the air. "Time's running out." They bolted to a murky door in the corner, only to find it locked tight. Panic clawed at Jake's insides as he fumbled with the handle, seeking any means of escape. "Come on," Claire urged, her voice barely above a whisper. The sound of the creatures grew closer, the growls mixing with the cheerful laughter haunting them like a malevolent serenade. Finally, with a desperate twist, Jake slammed his shoulder against the door. Cracks began to splinter the wood as the laughter surged behind them, the creatures relentless in their pursuit. "I can't get it open," he grunted, sweat pouring down his brow. "Jake, behind you!" Claire shouted. Jake spun just in time to see one of the hideous figures lunging toward him. He shifted to the side, feeling the creature's breath wash over him like a tide of decay. In a sudden surge of survival instinct, Jake grabbed a nearby kitchen knife, brandishing it against the creature. It recoiled for a moment, uncertainty flickering in its mangled features. "Back off!" Jake screamed, though fear gnawed at his resolve. With every ounce of courage, he lunged toward the door again. This time, Claire joined him, their combined weight crashing against it as the grotesque figure howled in outrage. The wood splintered, and they forced their way through just as the laughter crescendoed into a violent roar. What awaited them on the other side was darkness heavier than anything before. A tunnel stretched out before them, its entrance cloaked in shadows and seemingly leading deeper into the bowels of their tormentor's domain. "Is there any other way?" Claire pleaded, dread etched across her face. "No, this is all we have." Without a second thought, he took a step into the abyss, dragging Claire with him, both feeling the pull of the unknown just beyond the flickering lights behind them. They descended into the blackness, the laughter fading into something far more sinister, the sound of churning chaos. Each step echoed their heartbeat, a reminder that escape was still a mirage, just within reach but threatened by the gathering gloom. Would they find sanctuary within the shadows, or was this descent the beginning of the end? The tunnel swallowed them, enveloping Jake and Claire in an oppressive darkness that felt alive, breathing with a sinister pulse. Each step they took resonated ominously, resonating against damp stone and echoing fears they desperately fought to stifle. "Can you see anything?" Claire whispered, her voice trembling, as panic snaked its way back into her chest. Jake shook his head, every sense on high alert. The path twisted unnaturally, like a giant serpent coiling in on itself, leaving them uncertain if they were headed deeper into the horror or toward a way out. Then, as if mocking their plight, a muted glimmer appeared up ahead. They stumbled forward, desperate for any sign of hope. The flickering light revealed a door, warped and ancient, as if it had been forgotten by time itself. "Maybe this leads outside," Claire said, a hint of excitement sparking in her eyes. Jake approached cautiously, heart hammering against his ribs. "We should be careful," he began, but Claire stepped forward, her hand already on the tarnished knob. With a deep breath, she turned it slowly. The door creaked, protesting the invasion of the tiny sliver of light that burst into the tunnel. With a final push, they tumbled into an expansive chamber filled with grotesque displays. They froze in horror as they gazed around. Across the room, an array of table-like platforms held jars of what might have once been human organs, suspended in murky liquid, their appearances grotesquely preserved. The walls were decorated with garlands of dried flesh and twisted faces that seemed to call out to them in silent anguish. Claire's voice quivered as she instinctively stepped back. They were not alone. Figures lurked in the shadows, hollow eyes watching them with unyielding hunger. Jake felt bile rise in his throat. "We need to go," he urged, but as he turned to leave, a chorus of whispers engulfed them. "Stay for the feast," they cooed, the sound vibrating through the air. Tears sprang to Claire's eyes. "No, we can't." She grabbed Jake's wrist, pulling him toward a rickety stairway leading downward, but Jake hesitated. "Look." He pointed toward a doorway on the opposite side of the chamber, barely illuminated by a dim flicker. The whispers intensified, slithering around them like tendrils of smoke. "That's our way out." Without another moment's hesitation, they raced toward the door. The whispers grew frantic, clawing at their minds, piercing through the fog of terror that enveloped them. Desperate fingers reached for them, wanting to pull them back into the horrors of that chamber. As they reached the threshold, Jake could feel a draft, cool against his heated skin. Just as they sprinted through the doorway, a chilling cry erupted behind them: "You can't escape the feast." The door slammed shut, rattling against their backs with the force of 1,000 tormentors' hands. They leaned against it, breathless orbs of fear and relief, but the celebration of horror was not over. The corridor ahead was narrow and dark, but a glimmer of hope shimmered at its end. As they moved deeper, a warm light flickered, brushing against their skin like a promise of safety. But with every step forward, a sinking dread took root in Jake's stomach. Somewhere, the whispers still followed. What twisted truth awaited them at the end of this seemingly endless passage? "Jake, are you okay?" Claire asked, her voice breaking the tense silence. "I will be," he replied, though doubt crept in. But before he could voice his concerns, a sudden screech erupted from the shadows, drowning out their thoughts, and in that moment, Jake realized the terror they had faced was only the beginning. "Run!" he shouted again, driven by instinct, but this time, the darkness shuddered, clinging tightly to them, threatening to swallow them whole. As they sped toward the light, the ground trembled beneath them, and the scuttling sounds grew louder. An army of nightmares advancing. Would they find salvation, or was this light just another trick in a twisted game? Jake and Claire sprinted down the narrow corridor, hope and dread colliding in their chests. The warm glow ahead teased at salvation, but shadows danced along the walls, taunting them with laughter that echoed from the abyss behind. Each step felt like a race against their hearts' wild beats, and yet, something in the light beckoned an instinctual promise of safety. "Almost there," Jake urged, glancing back at the darkness churning, its whispers weaving through the air like vines of despair. Claire's hand squeezed his, and together, they pushed on, adrenaline fueling their flight. The screeches and scuttling sounds loomed closer, a reminder that they were far from free. As they neared the glow, the corridor opened into an expansive room, bright but somehow eerie. Inside, a long table stretched across the middle, laden with grotesque dishes and lurid decorations. Yet, at the end of the table, a door stood ajar, revealing the world beyond. A sunset painted in reds and oranges, casting a warm embrace that felt like a distant dream. "Jake, that's it!" Claire gasped, her face lighting up with a mixture of relief and fear. "We have to get there." But as they approached the table, a sinister figure rose from the shadows, a grotesque amalgamation of laughter and hunger. It grinned with an infinite twist of malevolence. "Welcome to the true nature of the feast," it said, its voice slithering into their minds, sending a shiver down their spines. "No more games!" Jake shouted, adrenaline surging. With a defiant shove, he pushed Claire toward the door at the end of the table. "Go. I'll hold it off." But the figure chuckled, undeterred. "You believe you can defy the feast? You are already part of the menu." The laughter crescendoed, each note wrapping around their resolve, pushing them to despair. But here, in this final arena, Jake's pulse thundered against his skin. The laughter merged with the cold, oily shadows behind him, and with a sudden clarity, he realized everything that had happened. The faces frozen in horror beyond the glass, the eerie echo of their own fear was feeding the malevolent spirit of the restaurant. They were bound to this darkness, yet the real power lay within them to break free. "Claire!" he shouted, pulling her toward the door with renewed determination. "This is our chance." She nodded, bright fear filling her eyes. They darted around the table, swerving past terrifying displays and finally reaching the exit. The sun kissed their skin as they pushed through the door, bursting out into the open air that felt electric with possibility. But freedom was snatched like a candle blown out. The door slammed shut behind them with an anguished scream that echoed in their ears. Jake and Claire stumbled to a halt, turning to face the shadowy figure silhouetted against the bright light beyond. "You can never leave the feast behind," it sneered, memories of those unfortunate souls still entrenched in the restaurant flashing behind it in tortured visions. "No," Jake declared, gathering courage from Claire's presence beside him. "This ends now." He stepped forward, confronting the dark specter. "Your power comes from fear and terror. We reclaim our choices. We refuse to be your meal." As he spoke, the warm glow of the sunset danced and sparked. It felt alive, resonating with the intensity of their defiance. In that moment, the shadows around the restaurant quaked. The figure faltered, eyes widening with disbelief as the laughter bent and twisted into a mournful cry. "No. You cannot." But Jake took Claire's hand. "Together," he shouted, and with a furious pull, they stepped away from the shadows, their unified force igniting a burst of light. The darkness writhed and screamed, splintering and shattering, as the warm glow enveloped them. They felt lightness, weight lifting, the horrifying memories washing away like a forgotten burden. As the last echoes of darkness faded, Jake and Claire found themselves outside the restaurant, in the safety of the dusky twilight. The air was sweet and crisp, the distant sounds of crickets serenading their victory. They turned to look back. The towering structure stood ominous but harmless now, a relic of the horrors they had bravely conquered. "We did it," Claire breathed, relief flooding her voice. Jake nodded, exhaustion melting away. "Yeah, we did." They embraced, a bond forged in fear and courage, knowing they defaced the dark together and emerged victorious. They turned to walk, hand in hand, toward a horizon promising a brighter tomorrow, a life unshackled from nightmares. But as they faded into the night, the faintest echo of laughter lingered, a reminder that shadows, while defeated, never truly forget. Now, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. And flood the comments section with your reactions and spine-chilling theories about this ending. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.